to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner. If you're joining us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are going to talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And here to talk about it with me is Chief Political Correspondent Byron. And Byron, why don't you give us a little précis of what this case is about? It's got some extraordinary aspects, but why don't you just run through what the case is?
Kilmar Abrego Garcia is an illegal immigrant from El Salvador, came to the United States illegally in roughly 2012, we think. Don't have a precise date or place for that. And the reason he's in the news at the moment is that he is among the people that the Trump administration deported to El Salvador and is in that pretty rough prison in El Salvador. But people on his side in Maryland, where he had been living and was picked up, say he doesn't deserve to have been deported. The Trump administration says he's a gang member. They say, no, he's not. He's just a father trying to have special needs kids, trying to make a living. And so this is an outrage. And a judge, a U.S. district judge in Maryland, has ordered the Trump administration to bring him back. And then failing that, they ordered him to facilitate his return. And so far, the Trump administration has said no. And it's going to get to the Supreme Court. There's no doubt about it. And meanwhile, we're only now, after Democrats are just in kind of a frenzy about this now, only now are we learning some of the actual facts about the case. And I think, this is my opinion here, I think they point toward the administration being correct that Garcia actually was a member of MS-13, which is the violent transnational gang in El Salvador.
Right. So even Garcia's lawyer concedes, and the facts are there, that the man is under a deportation order. What is in dispute is whether or not he should have been removed. I think that the Trump administration admits that he should not have been removed in the way that he was. And as you say, it's likely to go to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court has said that the administration must facilitate his return here, but that the district court must also give due deference to the administration's right and duty under the Constitution to conduct foreign policy and national security policy. So it sounds as though it's going to come down to a sort of a semantic argument about what actually constitutes facilitating the return of somebody. And I presume that the Trump administration will say, we are facilitating it to the extent that if El Salvador wishes him to come back, he is an El Salvador citizen. If El Salvador wants him to come back, we will actually bring him back. Is that where it's going to come down to, do you think?
Well, it's a little, that was pretty complicated, but it's actually a little more complicated than that. When he was picked up in 2019, he was here illegally, just no doubt about that. And he was suspected of having gang affiliations. And one of the themes in his life is that he's often seen with people and sometimes photograph people with people that he has no idea who they are. He was picked up outside a Home Depot in Maryland, Prince George's County, Maryland, in 2019, talking with three other guys, gang investors from the Prince George's County Police Department, questioned them all separately. When he was arrested in 2025, gang investigators from ICE showed him photographs of himself with other people. And he said, I just have no idea who that is. Yeah. Now, gang investigators show you pictures of yourself with known members of a gang, okay? But he just doesn't know where he is. Now, what happened was in 2019, he realized he was in trouble because he was here in the United States illegally. So he wanted some sort of relief, some sort of protection that he could stay in the United States. He asked for asylum and he didn't get it. And then he asked for some sort of protection under the Convention Against Torture. He said he'd be tortured if he went back to El Salvador. He didn't get that either.
Right.
The judge said, no, actually, I think you're a gang member. This is the
Mm-hmm.
immigration judge.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, gang members are killed all the time in El Salvador. And I think that if you went back to El Salvador, you might be killed. So
Mm-hmm.
what I'm going to do is give you something called WOR, withholding of removal, which was an order that said uh, Abrego Garcia can be deported anywhere except El Salvador. He
Mm-hmm.
cannot be returned to El Salvador. That's all the order was. If the Trump administration had deported him anywhere else other than El Salvador, he'd have no case at all. But in fact, the immigration judge said no, he can't be deported to El Salvador, and that's where the Trump administration took him. So when it goes to the Supreme Court, there's this question, and I heard the way you described it. There is this facilitate issue, and there's been a lot of parsing and debate over the word facilitate. But there's also the bigger question of what to do with Garcia. Most news reports have said that the Supreme Court ordered him to be returned to the United States.
Right.
If you look at what the Supreme Court wrote, and I got it in front of me, he said that the Supreme Court said that the district judge had properly required the government to facilitate Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador, not to
Right.
bring him back,
Right.
but to his release from custody. Clearly, it seems to me, and I have no role in this, but it seems to me the solution to this is to get Garcia out of this jail in El Salvador, take him to the U.S. Embassy, and then deport him from there to some other country. Never comes back to the United States.
Right.
That would fulfill the verdict of the immigration judge, and it seems to me to be entirely consistent with what the Supreme Court wanted. But the big fight is, and the media is demanding, and Democrats are demanding that he be brought back to the United States. And I don't think the Trump administration is going to give in on that one. Might be wrong, but not sure they will.
As you say, Democrats are making an enormous deal out of this. It seems to be a political miscalculation. I mean, even as we speak, at least one Democrat, Chris Van Hollen, is heading south to El Salvador, and he has no appointments there. I don't know whether he plans to stand outside the jail and do a press conference or what he plans to do, but this seems to be a pretty unsympathetic case. It seems to be one of those cases where the Democrats have chosen to side with the 10 or perhaps 20% of people who are sympathetic to this guy. He appears to me to have no future in the United States, and they are siding against perhaps the 80% of people who think they don't want him in the United States. So presumably, I mean, this is not a very good issue for the Democrats, and President Trump must be pretty pleased that the Democrats are focusing on perhaps his most popular issue, which is immigration.
I think, as sometimes happens in politics, I think what the Democrats are doing now is better explained in terms of psychology and emotions than in terms of political calculation. And they just seem to have gotten themselves all worked up about this. And I don't know exactly why. They certainly, some of them think it's a winner for the Democratic Party. And certainly, according to the law as we know it now, the Trump administration should not have deported Garcia to El Salvador. It should have deported him to Honduras or somewhere else.
Right.
So, but that's just not the biggest black and white issue I've ever seen in my life. And I agree with your assessment entirely that this is an 80-20 or a 90-10 issue, and the Democrats are on the short side of it. Hopefully, we'll learn more about Abrego Garcia and his history, and we will have a better idea of what's involved in this case. But when one side gets this emotional, you got to think they really should be a little more careful.
Yeah. So, Byron, as a final question, I want to sort of broaden out from the Garcia case to a sort of wider look at immigration and national security policy. There are plenty of people rather like Garcia. There are gang members who've come to the country. There are violent anti-Semites who organized the pro-Palestinian demonstrations, which became violent and barracked and harassed Jewish students. There are a lot of people who have been allowed into the country, a lot of foreigners who've been allowed into the country, and they strike, I think, a lot of Americans as being entirely undesirable. And that kind of goes to the bigger questions: why, not just whether these people should be removed or what the law is in a particular case, but
Yeah.
why were these people allowed in the first place? And the question that seems to have occurred to Americans throughout the last few elections is, surely no sensible country runs its immigration policy on this basis. And that is the sort of underlying, this irreducible concern that people have, and their view is that it is the absolute moral imperative that the people of this country be allowed to decide who from abroad is allowed to live with them in this country. That's the fundamental question, isn't it?
Yeah, I do think that some of the issues involved that are not specifically immigration related are, in fact, immigration related. I think that some significant part of the anti-Semitism we've seen demonstrated, certainly since October 7th, has been an immigration problem more than anything else. Um, part of what you're referring to, I think, is the case of Mahmoud Khalil,
Mhm.
the leader of anti-Israel demonstrations, who has a green card in the
Right.
United States. That is, he is a legal permanent resident, whom the Trump administration wants to deport. And now there's a big fight going on about that. There are different levels of protection. Um, uh, for people in the United States. Obviously, the highest is for U.S. citizens.
Right.
The next highest would be with somebody who has a green card, who's been
Hmm.
granted legal permanent residence. It's harder to throw them out than it is to throw somebody out who's on a student visa.
Right.
And clearly, it seems to me that given a lot of what's gone on in some of the campuses, the administration should terminate a number of student visas across the country. Now,
Right.
I do want to distinguish between harassment, violence, and constitutionally protected speech.
Yes.
You do not want to get a situation where you have the authorities punishing people for what should be constitutionally protected speech.
Right.
And that's a critical issue to me, and I think to a lot of people. But when it does cross into harassment, when it does cross into violence, especially with people who have a very tenuous right to be here, that is somebody on
Hmm.
a student visa, I don't see why the authorities cannot take action and terminate their student visas and send them out of the United States.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree with that, and as a card holder myself. So I think that's where we'll leave it, Byron. That's where we'll leave it with all the people, all our viewers. We're very grateful for you to come for coming to join us. We'll invite you to come back next time and join us for the next edition of Political Perspectives. Thanks very much.